It's Vicky. I'm in the UK. I'm at Edgehill University. I'll say a bit more about dance movement therapy and what it is, and I probably won't have enough time to say what it's not. But I'll try to also cover some of the evidence we have and link back to the work we're doing with Valentina. I'm based at Edgehill University. It's in the north of England, close to Liverpool and Manchester. I'm based in the Faculty of Health, Social Care and Medicine. And I am leading the Research Centre for Arts and Wellbeing, that a lot of the activity the research activity relating to the arts falls under. We have a thriving research community and research team here. These are just some of my immediate colleagues. And just to say a bit contextual information about the research centre, it covers any form of art, not just dance, visual arts, music, drama and theatre. I will just zoom into dance movement therapy because a lot of research is happening there, probably as a result of my own personal bias as a dance movement psychotherapist. Sort of there are areas that are, I guess, can be deduced from dance movement psychotherapy for the other arts therapists and potentially for them any therapeutic benefit the arts can have outside the context of therapy as well. So I'll focus on dance movement psychotherapy, what it is, who is it for, does it work, and some aspects of the therapeutic factors, what are responsible for change. So I'll slow down now because this is the meat of the work. Dance movement psychotherapy is defined as a relational process. It's between clients and therapists. There is a psychotherapeutic frame around it. And in terms of content, it uses movement, creatively movement and dance with a therapeutic intent. So it's not an accidental use of movement and dance. People come together for this purpose. It is one of the arts therapies or one of the arts psychotherapies, along with music, drama, and art therapy. It's a form of psychotherapy also in the UK, sits next to body psychotherapy, gestalt, and psychodrama, and practitioners get training, minimum of 2 years in the UK and a number of different countries as well. I think Germany has its own a master's program in Heidelberg, and Sabine might be talk about that later on. But in the UK, it's registered with the other psychotherapies and within the humanistic college in particular. The similarities and differences between dance movement psychotherapy and the other arts therapies, as well as differences from other forms of therapy or the use of the arts, has been extensively explored in my first book, which was very much my PhD work. So if you want to see more about where dance movement psychotherapy sits within the bigger picture, the bigger field, this might be a good introductory book. I'm also assuming people are not familiar with dance therapy, so I'm going to do some groundwork and we might take it further. And as part of this, defining the field, I'll try to share a video. If it works, will be wonderful as well. This video is coming from one of the studies we did, and we're currently still doing with adults with mixed mental health problems. So it's an introductory thing to what dance therapy is for them to be able to choose this as a modality.
So people think that to come to a dance movement psychotherapy session, they have to have experience of dance, and actually no at all, because we don't teach steps or routines. It's about really using movement and dance and rhythm to find different ways to express oneself and to different ways to experience being in our bodies.
It's really guided for the beginning, and then it moves into a bit more of a creative process, and the session kind of just evolved from there.
My first session, I was very tearful and emotional, and I ended up laughing and joking by the end of it, so it was really uplifting and helpful.
You've got all this very deep down inside, and you're just having a release. Whether it's movement or whether it's words or listening to other people, it's definitely a release.
I found it quite difficult to start with working in a group, and it was quite difficult to build up trust. But it's really lovely how you get to know people.
And we feel like there's a unity there.
You'll be feeling more emotional, more active, more positive, and more confidence.
Suffered from mental health for 18 years, and this and the music group are the most creative I found myself being, which just made me believe in myself.
So I hope this gives a bit of a taste of the quality of the movement that might take place, the intention, what may happen within a dance therapy session. Different approaches. I mean, we're talking about dance movement psychotherapy as if it's one thing, and it's far from being one thing. We have this as on your screen. You see 4 important approaches as I understand them. There is a movement-based dance movement psychotherapy, starting with Laban, where the intention is to expand and explore movement qualities, and the ultimate aim, if you like, is that if you are more resourced and having more options in terms of the types of movement you are performing, and that would be a sort of an important therapeutic change and an important therapeutic result as well. So that's focusing primarily on the movement qualities. Then there's another approach by Marian Chase that is very much about the quality of the relationship. So dance movement psychotherapy in its interactive form pays particular attention on what is happening between bodies, often between the client and the therapist, but also between clients with each other if there is a group work. So that's the interactive dance movement psychotherapy. And then we have the analytically informed dance movement psychotherapy that is starting with Mary Whitehouse, and often we associate authentic movement with that. And there the attention is less about what's happening in relationship and more about what's happening in the relationship with the self. So while the previous one is an interpersonal approach, this is more an intrapersonal approach. Connecting with the unconscious, with the past, with senses, sensory experiences. So these are sort of 3 main approaches that don't exist often in pure form. So you have an integrative, eclectic approach. Helen Payne in the UK talked a lot about that, and how the different approaches can connect with each other. Yeah, so this is just a sort of a bit of a map of possibilities within dance movement psychotherapy. In a piece that we did with a number of different arts therapists across the world, and that was a work during the pandemic. We tried to identify, this is what we're doing, but what is responsible for change? And we explored therapeutic factors in terms of the research that has already been done in the field. We looked at all arts therapies, we identified what is common with other forms of psychotherapy, of urban therapy. Then we looked at creative arts therapies, and then we looked at each of the modalities. And we found that the main contributions, the main elements, aspects of change for dance therapy are these. We have embodiment, which is not exclusive to dance movement psychotherapy. The other arts therapists also talk about embodiment, but I guess as dance movement therapists, we have a lot to say there, including experiencing the body and body awareness. The non-verbal component is extremely important. Being able to share things in action often becomes easier than talking about it. Access to the unconscious and the use of metaphors, body sensations. This sort of makes references to the intrapersonal, authentic movement approach to dance therapy. There's therapeutic factors that relate to development of artistic skills, developing agency, learning and practicing motion sequencing or connecting movement and language. These are some other important components that may create change. And of course, we have the Therapeutic Alliance, where we there is a belief that kinesthetic empathy, dialoguing through movement interactions, and movement synchronicity are therapeutic factors in themselves. So we have, you see the parallels here with the I-thou, the interpersonal component, and with the lab and the movement quality in the previous group of therapeutic factors. So these are areas that we suspect, we have some evidence, we have some research behind that says these are responsible for change. However, what we don't know yet is how what's happening in the body, in the brain. We don't know what are the exact mechanisms that if we do these things, this is the result. So the whole process of how we go from an input and movement interaction and movement activity into therapeutic change, this is still in the making. So I'm referencing back the work we're doing with Valentina, where we're bringing neuroscientists with dance practitioners and dance therapists. And in the conference we have in June, we'll also open it up to the other arts and arts therapists. And I have a gigantic QR code here for those who want to register and join us in person for this event. So this is regarding mechanism, therapeutic factors and mechanisms of change. Just to say a few things about examples of outcome studies. What do we know? Valentina talked about systematic literature reviews, and I'm going to reference only a few of those. We have much more. And with adults, on the basis of some of the reviews we did, we concluded that moderate to high quality studies indicate that there is an effectiveness, dance therapy is effective for adults with depression. However, most studies do not have an active control group. So we don't know whether that's how, when there is nothing to comparing to. Of course, dance movement psychotherapy is better, but is it better than exercise? It is better than other talking therapies. We don't know that. We also have done a lot of work with children and young people, and we know that a number of practitioners work with children and young people, but outcome studies in this area remain limited. And for this reason, we have embarked in a couple of different studies to develop this work further. If you want to see some of the studies in more depth, you have the systematic literature reviews on one hand, and books relating to depression, work in schools, and the other, where dance therapy features very well in there. So because we have we need to generate more outcome studies, we are talking about the ERA study. The ERA study is the largest study that we have on the effectiveness of art therapies and art therapist groups in particular, including dance movement psychotherapy. And this is for adults with mixed mental health problems. And this compares dance movement psychotherapy and the other art therapies with verbal talking therapies. So this is, where next year we're expecting the results to come out, and depending on the results, of course, we expect that services will be impacted in the UK and will fit into guidelines and national and international guidelines. The other study we are doing is looking at the Art for the Blues, a specific model we have developed, which we're looking for work with children and young people. And we've done a lot of work in schools, and now we're shifting also our attention to working with children that are fairly unwell in mental health services in hospitals. And this will take its own trajectory. We're building bit by bit to a large randomized control trial to establish effectiveness for children and young people. So just to start bringing things to a closure in terms of future research, things that I would propose is that we need large, good quality outcome studies with manualized interventions for specific populations. We're hoping that studies in neuroscience and dance movement psychotherapy will help us understand the process better, especially what's happening with participant observation, what's happening with synchrony and mirroring, and what happens when we're moving with our intention being internal rather than external. Another way of referring to that as movement meditation. We also know we have evidence already, but they haven't been put in place. So we have there is an urgent need for implementation studies, and for children and young people in particular, this is something we're currently doing. We received funding from the Arts and Humanities Research Council in the UK. This is the largest study that has been done in the art therapies and children's mental health. It's a collaboration with over 50 partners. We have national and international partners as well. And I'm probably going to leave us, if we have time, with this video about this new study that is happening that will include dance and dance movement psychotherapy, anything creative that can contribute to the mental health of children and young people and supporting their mental health. Should I finish with this video? Are we okay with that in terms of time? I'm assuming that's okay.
Yes, Vicky. Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
1 in 5 children and young people are faced with mental health struggles. It's a mental health crisis that mental health services cannot accommodate. There's a very limited provision for children and young people, mostly therapies like CBT. There isn't really very much of creative therapies. We've been invited to make the link, the community assets in terms of arts-based therapies, and find a way of marrying that with what's needed within the NHS. This is one of the largest funding awards nationally for the arts therapies, and children's mental health.
Creative arts gives an opportunity to be able to express their emotions. And I think it transcends language and culture also.
One of our big activities will be to create a digital platform that would provide a sort of a referral pathway. We will map arts-based therapies, arts-based activities for well-being. We will be linking with healthcare providers. This digital platform will there will be a kind of a point of connections.
Children and young people will be involved in all stages of the project. They will act as co-researchers, ensuring that what we're producing is relevant to them.
We probably will integrate video games, virtual reality, or animations to make them attractive to children and young people.
This is a massive project with over 50 partners. We will bring together health services, schools, community organizations, youth groups, and of course cultural organizations.
I think it's a recognition as well of just actually how the arts can celebrate local communities and provide more focus on the unique identities they have in a really positive way.
One in
Okay. We'll have a bit of time for questions. I don't know whether that's something that
we have 5 minutes for questions. Is there anybody here in the audience with questions or just comments or just a hip hip hooray for the wonderful work? Yes, Asaf, and then Julia.
And then thank you, Vicky. It's amazing to see all this work. I just have maybe a comment or an angle that I would like to that I'm feeling that is implicit but is not named, and then the concept that also I think the political consequences we can see. I think in my work, our work, I can say, also with Julian here, many people, what for us was very important, also central, was how knowledge and ways of knowing coming from the practice, from the artistic practice, actually change the way people do science, their questions, the way they ask questions, what they consider as knowledge. For example, one case that we had with a colleague who came from attention research, doing kind of MEG and infra, all the high-tech kind of thing you can do on attention, but he through doing dance and somatic dance, he discovered that other kinds of attention that are never studied in conventional neuroscience. Yeah, and so I think there is this kind of knowledge coming out and endemic to Alexander technique and of course many other practices. And so I'm thinking, when you have your last slide and you say what we need is to validate, and to scientists help us understand what we are doing and so forth. This is of course important, but I think there's a huge place. There's such an amazing body of knowledge. The big slide you had there with all the references that can teach so much scientists about how to do better science, and I really encourage that. And I see that in the funding, and I'm kind of wondering, it's amazing you get all this money, but it's from the Council for the Arts, which is great. But shouldn't NHS or whatever in the UK pays for that? They should be paying for this kind of work. I mean, eventually, I'm saying this is kind of what we should hope for. The US has the same problems. You see huge projects funding, very big projects funding clinical work based on artistic practice. But who's paying for it is the really small art kind of, rather than the huge behemoth of money that is in the medical thing. Instead of going into there's so much more we can, there's so much more money that should be going instead of to this kind of work. I mean, that's just it.
Absolutely, I agree, and I don't know how much we dare to apply for this funding, Saf. I know in there are specific ways of what knowledge stands for when it comes to health, and the randomized control trials we have done, we're not doing it with the Arts Council, with the Arts and Humanities Research Council. We're doing it with NIHR, which is the Health Research Council. So the ERA study and the children's randomized control trial is following that route. And it has been in the past a closed shop. I mean, if I don't have a psychiatrist on board, I'm not going to get any funding. It's like a sort of a very clear, sort of need for validation from somebody who is already in the system and following particular types of thinking about research. I think there is a cultural revolution at the moment. There is a revolution in terms of research where embodiment, creativity, and whatever, the doors are not as firmly closed as they were before. And I think it's time for us to start knocking on doors or pushing half open doors as well. So in the last application I did on the children's randomized control trial we put forward, I was working for this application for 2 years. The success rate is not high, and from the NHS trust that we applied, 10 applications went in, and only this creative therapy study went forward. So there is something is happening. It's not as doom and gloom as it used to be. So that's at least my perspective in terms of funding and possibilities and how much we can bring in. But there is a language that we need to speak, which is very specific and has to fit within that context. And I don't know how much this is a language we need to talk about exclusively. I think it will be good if we have multiple languages there.
We'll have one quick question from Julien. Julien, tu avais quelque chose à dire, non?
Hello.
Ah non. Well, is there one more question in the room? Peter. Naturally. Go ahead.
Just a small one. Thank you for the talk. Can you hear me properly? Good. Okay. This is exciting and important, obviously. I was just thinking that when you early on they made this point that it's not learning routines. Like someone said this in one of the interviews. She said that it's not you're not in the way that maybe you would do often if you go to a dance class and you're going to do a performance. You're not like learning steps by steps and practicing over again. So that seems like a big difference between some types of dance and this, and I imagine maybe even between some types of movement or artistic expression. Yeah, and I'm just wondering, because that seemed to be the case for all the types of dance movement therapy you showed. So I'm just wondering if that is important and why that's important, that it's not practicing or drilling some performance, but it's this free open thing. I was just wondering how crucial that is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's not the sequencing of steps is not taken out. It's not an anathema. It's not excluded from the work. But often when things happen, they're there for people to sequence their own movements and create a movement phrase that has to do with that's how I was, that's how I am, that's how I want to become. I'm just giving a random example here. So things coming from the client forward. It's not about having a teacher stroke therapist telling people how to be. So it's very emergent from the client. The movement material comes from the client out. And I think that's a big difference from having a class where you learn things, right? This is a sort of exploring possibilities of who you are and how you want to be, what you carry in your life. This is not, nobody can tell you how to do that. You are the expert as a client. Does this make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, so I guess that would go for music therapy or painting therapy.
Yeah, it's the same for all the art therapies. Absolutely. It's very emergent. You know, you can offer structure as a facilitator, as a therapist, because I know dance, you know, I will bring choreographic ideas there, but the content will be filled with client's material.
You see, that's one of the places where the therapeutic approaches and then maybe the more traditional ways of doing art in general kind of splits up or does it differently. I'm so sorry.
There is something, I mean, when we're looking at improvisation, contact improvisation, authentic movement, these are practices also used in the dance world, right? And these are sort of the breeds from performance into therapy, I think. This vocabulary and way of thinking is not too far from some aspects of the dance practice, but it's far away from classical ballet, right? Where you have an structure and, modern ballet can be questions as well. The new ideas of who creates the dance and in what way that I guess more contemporary thinking in dance is not as divorced from therapy as one may think.